My friend, if you have ever wondered whether your favorite processed food is helping or hurting your health, this episode is for you. And welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. And on this day, we are revisiting one of the most controversial and confusing topics in nutrition. We are talking about processed foods. And joining us once more is none other than our dear friend, Dr. Neal Barnard, who actually just co-authored a fascinating new survey published in JAMA Network Open. And what the findings show is that a lot of people don't know a whole heck of a lot about processed foods, what they are. What, are they healthy? I don't know. They don't know either. But Dr. Neal Barnard is here to break all of that down. The data, we're talking more than 2,000 people participated in this, and we're going to learn why a lot of young people are actually really struggling to figure this out. You would think that maybe the younger generation would have this cracked by now. Not the case. So we're going to be getting into all of those results with Dr. Barnard, but we're also going to be taking it a step further and analyzing some of the most popular items that are sold on Amazon, the foods there. We're talking about everything from protein bars to breakfast cereals to frozen meals and snacks. You name it, we've got it on the list. Which ones are secretly healthy and which ones are downright dangerous and which ones might just surprise you. So this is an episode where science meets the shopping cart, and it begins right now as we welcome Dr. Neal Barnard to the Exam Room Live. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Hi, it's great to see you, Chuck.
Great to see you, and indeed, science is going to meet the shopping cart today. Let's start with the survey that we just published here at the Physicians Committee. More than 2,000 people were questioned here for this survey, and what did we learn from these results?
Yeah, 2,174 people, adults in the U.S. nationwide, and what we asked them first was, you hear about processed foods. What's a processed food in your mind? And I got to tell you, Chuck, people were all over the map. People did not really have one coherent idea. There wasn't any food that most people thought of as a processed food. The biggest category only scored about 28%. That was people finding some kind of meat product, like a hot dog was a processed food. And then after that, it was shelf-stable foods. Then after that, it was foods with additives, but none of them really rose to the top. And then the question was, okay, well, we're confused about what a processed food is. Do you think processed foods are unhealthy or not? Are all processed foods unhealthy? And here, about 39% of people said, yeah, they're all unhealthy. But 40% said, no, I don't think they're all unhealthy. And that's really important because science has weighed in on exactly that question.
That's interesting to me that there is still so much confusion out there. And you talk about the highest number we had, it was still below 30%, and that's the processed meat category. And that makes me wonder, we just had July 4th, all the cookouts, the hot dog eating contest. So we'll start with the hot dogs there in particular. Do you think that so many people are still eating hot dogs and half smokes and things like that because they don't equate that being a processed food and thus are unaware that when the World Health Organization says, hey, processed meat is a class 1 carcinogen, then it's just over their head. They're not able to connect the dots.
Well, I think in some ways, number one, processed meats are as bad as advertised. They are strongly linked to colorectal cancer. They're also linked to breast cancer and other forms of the disease. They're linked to cardiovascular disease. They're contributors to diabetes risk. They even cause lung diseases like COPD. All these things are down to processed meat. But the meat industry has, I think, been using this idea to say the problem isn't the meat. The problem is just processing. So your breakfast cereal could be terrible, or spaghetti could be terrible. They've made the list of things that are potentially terrible to be anything that had any kind of degree of processing at all, which is not true at all. And Chuck, I think this is sort of the latest. I don't know if this is intentional or if it just works out that way, but the meat industry has really been benefiting from this. Way back when people had the idea, maybe eating meat is not so good for you. It's got cholesterol, it's got bad fat in it, it's going to lead to heart attack. And that's true. Or dairy products loaded with cholesterol, bad for you too. But people have kind of gotten knocked off track. Like, well, okay, but where do you get your protein? Is there protein in plant foods? Or, well, but is it organic or not? Or what if, is it gluten free? Because the big problem is gluten. Or some people might say something like the big issue is sugar, or the big issue is carbohydrates. All these ways of deflecting people from this basic thing that meat just isn't good for you. So now processed foods come in, and you'll hear people say, well, if you're eating a red meat burger, that's got to be better than the veggie burger because the veggie burger is processed. Nonsense. The plant-based food is better virtually every time.
All right. If you have a question for Dr. Barnard, go ahead, drop it in the comment or in the chat. I already see Video 1000 Nights is wondering about an item in particular. So if there's a processed food perhaps that you're curious about, where it may fall on the sin scale in terms of your health, go ahead, post it there. We're going to get to as many as we can. I want to stick with the survey really quickly. I was particularly struck by the fact that in this survey, young adults really seem to be struggling to put the pieces together here as well. I had always assumed that a younger generation might be more educated when it came to healthy eating. At least that's what we see in terms of trends. But what did the survey bore out here in terms of what we're seeing for younger people, Dr. Barnard?
I have to tell you, Chuck, I think you put your finger on a hugely important thing. Here's why. If you look at, say, colorectal cancer, strongly linked to processed meat, okay? Colorectal cancer overall in the population is declining. It's going down year by year by year, except for what we call young people. That's anybody age 49 or below, the under 50s. There we see colorectal cancer rates rising. And it's not because of a change in genetics. I think it's because, yeah, they are educated by McDonald's. They're being educated by KFC. They're being educated by places that load the processed meats onto their plate, and they now think it's normal or even cool. Bacon is a fad. You can get bacon-flavored soap. So I think that's the big issue. And so we have young people who, after all, you're immortal when you're 18. So people will eat sausage and hot dogs and bacon, huge amounts of it. And so we're seeing colorectal cancer rates going up. There was just did you see the data came out, I think, yesterday from the CDC showing that prediabetes is increasing. It's hit 1 in 3 teenagers now. And all of these things, it's not because people are having too much breakfast cereal. It has to do with the animal products they're eating.
Holy smokes, 1 in 3? That's epidemic levels, my friend.
It is an epidemic, and it doesn't get better from there. I mean, when these kids get their high school diploma, they've already got prediabetes. Wait another 10 years and 20 years. They're on metformin, then they're on insulin, and then they are told by the doctor, you'll never get off this. And then they go in some other wrong direction, like I should avoid carbs. It was that kind of thinking that got them there in the first place. So yeah, they are educated, so to speak, but they're being educated by the wrong things. And I'm sorry to say that we're seeing a bigger focus on processed foods and ultra processed foods now than ever before. And it's a distraction. It's a mistake. Some of the, I think, really compelling data that came in on this was in 2023. Harvard researchers looked at foods and their relationship with diabetes, because there had been some thought that processed foods are going to contribute to diabetes. Well, what they found out was when you look at food by food by food, what they showed is that animal-based processed foods, this is the hot dogs and sausages and so forth, they were associated with a 44% increased risk of type 2 diabetes. But if you took a breakfast cereal, yeah, it's processed, but it was people who had the most breakfast cereals had a 22% reduction in the risk of diabetes. Sweet snacks, 11% reduction in the risk of diabetes. So what the Harvard researchers concluded was that although there's some exceptions, overall, the plant-based processed foods are associated with reductions in risk of diabetes, and the animal-based processed foods are the problem. So what we do is we take that word processed foods and throw it out. Throw out the ultra-processed foods. That's not our worry. Our big worry is it an animal-derived food? If so, it's got a huge strike against it.
All right. Before we get into specific foods, I want to just hit one more point about the survey. You used the word education quite a few times there, and I'm wondering whether or not the results of the survey were pretty equal, regardless of a person's level of education. Were, the highly educated people, the doctors of the world, your colleagues, more inclined to be able to properly identify processed foods than, say, somebody that may only have a high school degree?
The findings were pretty much across the board. We just as you said, we looked at educational levels, we looked at age levels, we looked at geography, we looked at political persuasion, and we also looked at both race and ethnicity, meaning Hispanic or non-Hispanic, and all the major races. And pretty much these themes echoed throughout the whole population, pretty much regardless of the subcategory. There was one other finding, though. We did ask individuals, what do you think causes diabetes? And the answer came back, sugar. That was the number one answer. About 50-some% of people said it's got to be sugar, and then after that, people said it's desserts or it's carbohydrates. And, wrong. The truth is that type 2 diabetes, well, in the mind of the public, it's that high blood sugar must be caused by eating sugar, and that's the big problem. And if I avoid sugar, I won't get diabetes. What research has shown, and we've known this now since the 1990s, is that type 2 diabetes begins as insulin resistance, where our cells don't respond to insulin. That's why the blood sugar is rising. And that comes from the buildup of fat inside our cells. We've talked about this before. So fat from that cheeseburger or that chicken wing or that cheese, that fat builds up in our muscle cells, in our liver cells. They no longer respond to insulin. So the sugar builds up in our blood, and it's not from eating the sugar. It's not from eating carbohydrate. It's from the fatty foods that we eat. And the reason that's important is that when a person changes their diet, they get the fat out of their cells and the diabetes improves or goes away. So unfortunately, as much education as we have been doing and as you have been doing, and we certainly have reached lots and lots of people, there are many people who still imagine falsely that diabetes came from some processed spaghetti or something like that, and they're really missing the real reason.
All right, now let's get into some specific foods here. I think that this is kind of going to be the main event portion of the show. I've spent some time over the last 36 hours or so really diving into grocery store data and seeing just what's being loaded into our shopping carts. And let me actually start with the good news. According to a website that tracks industry trends, Statista, they found that the most purchased items in grocery stores remains fruits and vegetables. That surprised me, but that's good news, Dr. Barnard. Let's just start there with the really good news there. I like that.
You surprised me too, Chuck. I would not have guessed that. I thought that the produce aisle, as big as it is, people kind of look there and they think, don't the blueberries look pretty? But they tend to neglect them. But I'm really glad to hear that people are picking them up.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah. Now, number 2 is eggs. Then you get into the dairy category, meat and sausage. And then you get into the other kinds of foods. And among the top of the list is breakfast cereals. And then I dug a little bit deeper. I'm a data guy. I know you're a data guy too. So I said, all right, what are the most popular breakfast cereals on the market? Number 1, Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And I without diving into the specific ingredients on Cinnamon Toast Crunch, I am curious because it was brought up. Somebody left a comment on Spotify, I think it was, after the last time you and I talked about processed foods. And they were like, there's no way that a simple ham and eggs breakfast from a restaurant is worse for you than a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which probably has a rather lengthy list of ingredients, including sugar. So let's really focus in on this and talk to me, even if it is what a lot of people would consider to be too healthy cereal, but there are no animal ingredients there.
Yeah, people are eager to beat up on sugar, like sugar is the devil. And I think that may be something we memorized when we were 4 years old and we wanted a sugar cookie and our mom told us, no, it's going to spoil your dinner. And so we got this idea that sugar is somehow terrible. Biology 101, your body, your brain, your heart, every cell in your body, its number one fuel is sugar. So if you don't get sugar into the cells of your brain or into the cells of your heart, you don't live. So sugar itself is not a bad thing. And sugar comes to us in fruit, of course, and it comes to us in carbohydrates. Carbohydrate is starch, is many sugar molecules linked together by molecular bonds that are digested by enzymes in your body to provide those sugars to your brain. So sugar is a good thing. Starch is a really good thing. What people are thinking of here is, well, but there's way too much of it, and that can be true. I mean, there can be added sugars, and you don't really need that. But this is nowhere near the problem that the fat in animal products is. So if a person is eating a steak and egg breakfast, they're at high risk for diabetes, for hypertension, for colorectal cancer, for heart disease, many other things. And if they stop that and eat a breakfast cereal, especially with some soy milk on top, they're making a really good switch, even if that cereal is sugar coated. Better it's not, because you don't need that added sugar, but that is not the devil. That's not the big problem. That is not the reason for obesity and health problems in America.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Amazon, our friends over there, everybody's friends, is at least during Prime Day. They publish a list of their most consumed or purchased items, in the grocery store aisles, and here are their top cereals. And so, we just talked about Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but then a lot of people say, well, oatmeal is about as healthy of a breakfast food as you can get. Does it matter, Dr. Barnard, if it is like their number one seller here, the Quaker Oats Instant Maple and Brown Sugar Oatmeal? Does that make a difference in terms of whether or not it should be crucified or celebrated?
It still beats the socks off an Egg McMuffin. It really does. Now, when you get oats, it's an oat, it's a grain. And so you get steel cut oats, it's pretty much just that grain. And then you can take one more step, you can flatten it. You say it's a rolled oat. So that's the one with the Quaker on the cover, for example. Rolled oats, perfectly fine. Now they'll say, well, I want it to cook faster, so they'll make minute oats. They cut it in thirds. It's still the same thing. And then to make it instant, they pulverize it even more, so it cooks faster, but it's still an oat. And they may add sugar, they may add flavorings. Those aren't necessary, but those also are not the devil. So if you are at the breakfast bar at your hotel, and what they have is instant oatmeal, that is a much healthier choice than the animal product. The less processed it is, the more slowly those sugars will enter your bloodstream, so you'll be able to handle them in a more effective way. But no, that's far from the worst food that a person could eat.
Right. And just to go back to what it was you were saying, the more processed it is, or the closer it gets to instant, the faster the body will absorb the sugar. Does that mean that it could be kind of a troublesome food if somebody already is struggling with insulin resistance? Should that kind of person gravitate more toward the natural whole oats at that point?
Well, the more natural it is, the better for everybody. But it's not a big deal whether you're insulin resistant or not. If you have something that has more fat in it, that's going to aggravate the insulin resistance. If you have something that has a quick release sugar, like the instant oatmeal compared with the old-fashioned oatmeal, it will cause a spike in your blood sugar. But the more you get to plant-based foods, the more that insulin resistance is going to melt away. And by the way, let me give you a mea culpa on this. About 15 or 20 years ago, I wrote that instant oatmeal had the fiber removed, and so you shouldn't be eating that. And one of the oatmeal manufacturers wrote me a letter and said, Dr. Barnard, as a matter of fact, we actually just pulverized it. All the fiber's still there. And I looked it up, and you know what? They were right. So I stopped saying bad things about them.
Wow. Look at that. See, and I think that's hugely important. And that's something that's come up in conversation recently is like, you have to amend your view based off of the data that's available to you, the facts that are available to you. So kudos to you for not digging in your heels and being open-minded. Let's talk Cheerios real quick, because you see two varieties right there in the top 5, both Honey Nut and regular Cheerios. Both are labeled as being heart healthy. I guess in your estimation, are they going to fall kind of in the same genre as the Cinnamon Toast Crunch, as the Quaker Instant Maple and Brown Sugar Oatmeal?
Yeah, they're playing out the fact that oats do lower cholesterol levels. It's not huge, it's a few percentage, but it's there. And so any oat formulation is going to have that effect. And that's why FDA says you can label it that way, whether it's old-fashioned oats or something that's kind of puffed up like Cheerios is. So the Cheerios are okay. There's no need for the extra sugar, but if it happens to be there, again, it's not the worst. It's not the worst problem. If you want to kind of dissect it. Take the package, look on the back, and look at the fat content per serving. If there's a fair amount of fat, that means they added something there to make it gooier. And that's going to be a much bigger problem than the added sugar is going to be.
So you see here for the traditional Cheerios, about 2.5 grams of total fat per serving.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really low. That's fine. You can't impeach that.
All right. Now, before we move on to a different form of foods, I want to scroll down to Reese's Puffs cereal, which no doubt I would have had a field day with as a child. I want to go to the ingredients on this one because my spidey senses tell me that these probably are going to have some animal-based products in here. What would your thought be on this? It's probably going to have here it is, Hershey's Cocoa, probably going to have some dairy in here at the very least.
By the way, for people who are trying to read a label and you think, oh my God, look at all these words. I mean, because there's a lot. I mean, it's a big, long list. One way you can quickly check, say, if your question is it vegan? Go to the bottom of the list. They usually have a way of highlighting any animal-based ingredient because people are allergic to that, and other allergens. Like it might list milk products, or it might list soy or gluten, other things that people are allergic to. Or sometimes in the list itself, it'll put those in bold. So if those aren't there, then that means it probably is vegan. And look at the cholesterol content. If that's 0, that's in the list too. If the cholesterol is 0, that also is a good index that it's probably a vegan product. And then after you've done those quick checks, you can slog through the list. But I always like to just look at the total fat per serving, as you did for the oat product. It was 2.5 grams per serving. Anything under 3 is really low. And so I would look there, and if it's low, then I wouldn't worry about it too much. But I like what you're saying about looking at the ingredients list. The ingredients are put in that list in proportion to how much of it is used in the product. So the number one ingredient is the one that there's the most of. So if the number one ingredient is sugar, that means it's mostly sugar and it's not mostly grain or something like that.
Well, it is whole grain corn in this case with the Reese's, followed by sugar. Actually, this does look like it may fall into that accidentally vegan category, the kind of the same way that Twizzlers and Oreos do.
Right.
It's got 0 cholesterol listed there. And the only cholesterol that would come would be is if, in this case, you add some skim milk with this. So.
Right. And then you take out your microscope and you want to look in, was there a casein product or a whey product? Those are other words for dairy. And then you look through them, and if they're not there, then that's what it is. Yeah. So people always still like simple foods, one ingredient foods, and they're right. But something that's like this, that's still plant-based, everything's from a plant, not such a bad thing.
All right, let's go ahead and move on over to snacks now. It's kind of a same deal here. And now we get into probably it's easier to detect. And I think that, one of the biggest sellers on Amazon, no question about it, the Variety Chips Pack. This one, Dr. Barnard, has everything from Cheetos and Doritos to Sun Chips. But then you have pretzels and I believe popcorn in the mix as well. Not all of these are going to be created equally, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And the issues that we've discussed are all important. Where fats added, for many of these, you're going to see cheese and other dairy products added. That's going to ramp up the cholesterol, ramp up the fat part. And then also in this category, you see another thing, which is sodium. Sodium is, for most people, not the biggest consideration. Because you actually do need some sodium in your diet. If it goes off the scale, it's going to raise blood pressure and it's going to cause some water weight. And you don't see that so much with breakfast cereals, but you do see it with the snacks.
All right, number one bestseller. This one can be confusing because it's a protein bar. It has to be healthy, right? And it's labeled as nutritious in the description. Low sugar, gluten-free. It has to be good for you, right? Well, let's go ahead and flip on over to, as you say to do, look at the ingredients here. In your estimation, it's got 15 milligrams of cholesterol. And as you just said, that would be a red flag. What is your take on this particular protein bar?
Okay, well, if it's got any cholesterol at all, it's got an animal product in it. That's where the source is going to be. So what is that? It's either going to be a meat product, a dairy product, or an egg product. Because it's a protein bar, it's probably one of the latter two. It's probably an egg white or dairy solids, something like that. And then you want to flip to the fat, which is one of the top right there under the calories there. If you look at the total fat content, and as I said, our target is 3 grams or less per serving. So you just want to see if we're under that or not.
Not in this case. We're at 4.5 grams of total fat. 3.5 are saturated. And again, you have that whopping amount of cholesterol here.
Now, you touched on something really important. The fat content there overall, not enormous if it's 4.5 grams per serving size. The two things you want to look at are how big was the serving size? Because you and I know that you're going to eat 1 bar, and if that's what their serving size is, if it's the whole thing, then they're being reasonably honest, and it looks like they are. Don't they say 1 bar up at the top?
It does.
So that's okay. Then the other thing I look at is how much of that fat is saturated fat. If they put in coconut fat or something like that, or palm oil, coconut oil, palm oil, those are very heavily saturated, and those you want to avoid them completely. Why? They will clearly raise your blood cholesterol. They're going to raise your LDL. Now, I know there's been a lot of push lately to say, exonerate saturated fat. It's not so bad. Ignore that voice. The jury came in a long time ago, and it's very clear that if you eat saturated fat, your cholesterol level is going to rise. If your cholesterol level rises, that is linked to cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, and other health problems.
Yeah, lots of dairy proteins right up at the top. The protein blend, milk protein isolate, whey protein concentrate, and then you get in down the list. It does contain palm kernel oil, but they call it fractionated palm kernel oil. What is fractionated? That's a new term to me.
It's wonderful that they find so many ways of changing. They took a lesson from the sugar industry, because the sugar industry realized if they called it sugar, people wouldn't buy it, but if they called it dextrose or dehydrated cane, juice or something, they would find some way of changing sugar. And that's what you see with palm oil. They'll call it palm oil, palm kernel oil, or whatever. It's still heavily saturated, and it's still a big problem. And researchers have tested this in randomized trials, not just against no diet change, but even against other oils. The palm oil or the coconut oil raise blood cholesterol levels. You don't want to have them. And by the way, don't switch to butter. Butter is going to be worse. One other thing that you mentioned here, Chuck, is that you mentioned the whey proteins that were being used here. A lot of people kind of grew up with this idea that you go down to the GNC and they'd have these canisters of whey protein so that bodybuilders could come in and get this whey protein that would help them build muscle. It's one of the great marketing successes of our time. Whey protein is a cast-off product of cheese making. When you make cheese, you clump together the casein, which is the main dairy protein, and the whey you don't want. The whey is in this liquid, and you would dump it out, and they would put it in landfills, and they had all this whey they were trying to get rid of. And somewhere, people discovered if you dehydrate that whey, the whey liquid, and you take the whey protein, you could put it in a tank, and bodybuilders buy this. And so instead of dumping it out in the landfill, they started marketing it as somehow better than other proteins. It's not any better at all. But that's what you're seeing in that protein bar. They're using it's just a cast off of cheese making, and they're trying to make money off of it.
And really quickly, let's slip over to a plant-based nutrition bar, protein bar. Obviously, it's got plant-based on it, so I would assume just ingredients-wise, it's probably going to pass the list. But I want to talk to you about this because you look at the total fat, 12 grams, saturated fat, 3 grams. Even though this is plant-based, probably not going to be the healthiest option, especially, Dr. Barnard, I would assume, if somebody's trying to lose weight.
That's the issue. The type of fat that they're using is obviously a better type of fat because the saturated fat content is a rather modest amount. So they must have drawn their fats either by incorporating lots of nuts in it or plant oils, probably one of the two. And so what they're getting is not so high in saturated fat, but every gram of fat packs 9 calories. So even though the type of fat is not that bad, if you're trying to lose weight, or you're trying to knock down diabetes, or you're trying to deal with a hormonal condition, you want to get away from these fatty foods.
Yeah, there you go. And number 1 on the ingredients list here are peanuts. Hey, kudos to them, though. At least they're organic peanuts. But there you go. So now let's jump over to, I'm sure it's a category that you're going to have a field day with. Our most bestsellers in meat and seafood. Number one, you see beef jerky here. It just dominates the top of the list here. Now, I want to jump straight to the ingredients, which, in all honesty, Dr. Barnard, are far fewer than a lot of the ultra-processed breakfast cereals that we just looked at, the protein bars, even the one that was plant-based. So this is a shorter list of ingredients, and the fat content is even relatively low. But then you look at the cholesterol, 25 milligrams. I think it would be easy for somebody who's skeptical of this message to say, well, this is definitely going to be, save the cholesterol, a healthier option. But what would your retort be?
Well, this is, I presume, not having looked at the ingredients, I presume that the main ingredients are meat.
Yes.
I noticed it also says that it does include some wheat and some soy. So they're using some extenders there, and the wheat and the soy would be the good part of it. But when you're using meat as your ingredient, what are you doing? You are, of course, getting whatever meat fat is there, and even if it's defatted, there's still going to be some. The second problem is that the protein itself, we had thought back in the 1960s and 70s that, well, animal proteins are complete proteins. They've got all the essential amino acids. That's going to be better for you. But in 2015, researchers at Harvard started doing mortality studies. What you do is you look at what people are eating, and then you look at the next time window, the next 4 years, the next 8 years, the next 12 years, who lives and who dies. They found the most amazing thing. These were Harvard researchers looking at more than 100,000 people. They found that the people who, instead of animal products, instead of animal proteins, had plant proteins, their mortality was significantly reduced by having the plant protein. This is controlling for the fat, the cholesterol, everything else. Getting your protein from plants reduced mortality, and that was true whether the animal protein you were comparing it with was beef protein, pork protein, fish protein, dairy, egg, any of it. So the animal protein there is part of the problem, not part of the solution.
All right. And for those who are listening to the audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcast and Spotify, by the way, thank you, Canada, for making us the number 3 nutrition podcasts in all of Canada last week. Love you guys. Here are the ingredients for this particular brand of beef jerky, Dr. Barnard. Very, very close to what it is you assume. Beef, brown sugar, water, soy sauce, which contains water, wheat, soybeans, and salt, and then 2% or less of additional sea salt, regular salt, flavors, beef stock, cultured celery extract, and pineapple powder. So those are the ingredients there. Is there anything there that would change your mind, change your opinion?
The sugar is making the product look better than it would be otherwise. It's like the healthiest thing in it. No, it's something you don't want to be eating, obviously.
All right. And bacon, just I want to do this one quickly because I know everybody loves bacon. The ingredients here, the bacon is cured with water, sugar, salt, smoke flavoring, sodium phosphates, sodium erythro. Oh boy, I need to go back to college and study Latin on this one. Erythrorbate, and then sodium nitrates are in this particular brand of bacon. 4 slices of bacon, 6 grams of fat, 2 grams are saturated, 20 milligrams of cholesterol. Let's talk about bacon. Again, it's a shorter list of ingredients, but where does this fall in the scale of nutrition evil, my friend?
Near the top. It's a terrible food because whether it's a long ingredient or a short ingredient, I mean, if you take arsenic, it's got 1 ingredient, it's going to kill you. The fact that you got a lot more ingredients doesn't make something better or worse. In this case, bacon is strong, like other processed meats, is strongly associated with a higher risk of diabetes as the years go by, higher risk of colorectal cancer and other forms of the disease, and many other problems. And even my friends who are still in the meat industry recognize that this is the kind of food that's going to make your kids sick. And not, unfortunately, not sick when they're kids usually. Although we talked about 1 in 3 kids now has insulin resistance. They're not aware of it. Right. They still think they're doing okay. And it's not until they're, late 20s, 30s where they realize they're getting pudgy and they're having trouble and their blood pressure's up and whatever, that they start to pay a price.
You know what I find interesting is right on the front package of this, the bacon is layered on top of a hamburger. Well, a cheeseburger, as a matter of fact. So Yeah, why not? Let's just add all the meats to it, kind of like Arby's. All right, let's go ahead and open up the doctor's mailbag and take some questions. I want to start with a question from Roger, who is so happy to be able to be joining us live. He's wondering about everybody's favorite food aside from bacon, pizza. In particular, Roger at 112 is wondering what your thoughts are on Amy's vegan frozen pizzas. So, what do you think there?
There's more than one. If I'm thinking of the right brand, they have a vegan pizza that has vegan cheese on top, but they also have another one that is no cheese. Pick that one. Because what you're going to have is a nice savory crust with beautiful toppings on top. You're not going to miss the cheese. It's not there, and it's a much better choice. Vegan cheese is always better than dairy cheese. Let me say that again. Vegan cheese is better than dairy cheese. You don't have any of the dairy proteins in it, but some of them are made with coconut fat to give it that cheesy mouthfeel. Others are made with lots and lots of, say, cashew products, which is better, but it's still more fat than you want. So good product if you pick the one that's cheese-free.
All right. A lot of people think that tofu is a very heavily processed food and put that right into the same category as, I don't know, a Snickers bar. Let's start with Bivan at 110. What is the good or the bad, in your opinion, with tofu, Dr. Barnard?
Tofu is a processed product, and it's great. You took a soybean and you rendered it into something where you can. It's extremely versatile. Tofu and other soy products are associated with weight loss, with about a 30% reduction in breast cancer risk, a similar reduction in cancer risk for men. So tofu is great. The only problem with tofu is that a lot of gringos like me, growing up in, say, in North Dakota, I never tasted it until I grew up and moved to Washington, where I first had tofu. Tofu is fine. Let's say some kudos to the soy industry. Soybeans in the little pod, it's edamame. That's the little baby soybean. If you let it grow up and be a mature soybean, that's a soybean. Those are great. And if you turn it into soy milk or tofu, those are good products too. They're always better than what they're replacing. And if you grind it up and turn it into veggie bacon, it's extremely versatile. One day they'll make snow tires out of tofu or out of soy. It's so versatile, you can make anything with it. All of those are still associated with weight loss and cancer reduction. So this is why I'm saying we don't need to worry so much about the processing. You're just taking those soy molecules and putting them in a different form.
Does it matter if it's a plain block of tofu, or at 108, we have Video 1000 Nights wondering about tofurkey. They're wondering about, in particular, your thoughts on something like that.
Fine, perfectly fine. Look at the label. If it's plant-based and if it's low in fat, perfectly fine. The one thing I would do is if you're buying a block of tofu, look for the word organic. If it is organic, not only is it pesticide-free and so forth, but by U.S. law, anything marked organic cannot be GMO. There's a lot of GMO soy in this country. It's raised as cattle feed. You look out in the field, you see all those soy products. No human is going to eat that. That's chicken feed, cattle feed, hog feed. It's GMO. If you buy soy milk or tofu and it's marked organic, it cannot be GMO.
All right, let's grab two more really quickly. A little bit of a curveball, but definitely still fits with the theme. Diane, I think, is looking at a different type of health goal when she asked this question at 1244. Says, listen, I'm detoxifying from processed foods and I'm having toxic hungry. What can I do until my body gets used to eating vegan? Please advise. So that is a little bit different, but it sounds like maybe Diane had the same kind of issue that I had back in the day, where it was all kinds of these massively unhealthy processed foods all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, a guide to the foods that are processed but still okay for you and fine to include are two rules. One is, are the animal products gone from it? If it's free of animal products, that's great. Secondly, is it low in fat? So you look at the fat content on the label, and if it's less than 3 grams per serving, go ahead. So what this allows you to do is say, I'm looking at the store and there's potato chips and there's Oreos and so forth. Well, those are going to violate, they may be vegan, but they're going to violate your fat limit. So you're going to set that aside. And the processed foods that you're left with are certain breakfast cereals and breads and pastas and things that there's no reason to avoid them, because they're going to be perfectly fine for you.
All right. And the last question is one I'm hoping that we can really just kind of encapsulate everything that we have learned over the past 40 minutes or so. It comes to us at 109 from Eat Plants, Pet Cats. That's a fun name. So let's think about this. I need you to like put on your doctor's coat and your thinking man's cap and tell me this. How would you succinctly tell a client which processed foods to avoid?
The ones you want to avoid, number one, are ones with animal ingredients in them, because that is where we have seen the links to diabetes and heart disease and others. The ones derived from plant products, no. The second rule is the ones that are lowest in fat are always going to be the best.
All right. And listen, you guys asked so many great questions today in the chat. It was impossible to get to all of them. So we're going to save them and do our best to revisit this topic in a future episode. Just judging by the amount of people who are watching us live right now and how many unanswered questions we have, Dr. Barnard, I think the conversation is probably going to continue if you're up for that.
Can't wait.
All right. And listen, I want to say a huge thank you to the Gregory J. Reiter Memorial Foundation for powering today's episode of the Exam Room Live, because the Gregory J. Reiter Memorial Fund supports organizations just like the Physicians Committee that are carrying on the love that Greg had for animals by promoting plant-based health and working to end animal abuse, while also emphasizing programs that promote systemic change to benefit us human beings as well. And you can visit them online, see everything that they're up to. Their website is GregoryReiterFund.org. That's Gregory Reiter, spelled Reiter fund.org. You see it right there on the bottom of your screen. As always, Dr. Barnard, can't say enough about everything that Greg did to make this world a healthier, happier, and more compassionate place for us all.
You said it. Greg had such a warm and compassionate heart, and Allison has carried that work forward just so beautifully.
No doubt about it. And I hope to see Allison at the International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine coming up August 14th through the 16th. I assume that we're going to be talking about processed foods there as well, Dr. Barnard.
Oh, we are. We have several big sessions on this. Christopher Gardner from Stanford is going to come and share his findings. Michael Greger will be there talking about the question of what about these burgers like Impossible or Beyond or others? How do they stack up? How do they come in here? So we're going to be tackling these. And Dr. Hannah Kaliova and I have some brand new statistics to share with people on unhealthy versus healthy plant-based foods. How do we make sense of that? It's going to be a really terrific event. Dr. Christy Funk will be there for zeroing in on breast cancer. The AMA president, Bobby Mukamala, is going to be there joining us live and in person. So can't wait.
Absolutely. And look, Dr. Roxy Becker and myself, we're going to be hosting a nutrition game show for the first time at ICNM this year on night 1, August 14th. So can't wait for that. And as an exclusive offer for you exam roomies right now, I want to offer you $50 off to join us. Use the code Nutrition50 through the month of July to register and save on your ticket. And you can go to PCRM.org/ICNM to get your ticket today, or click that link down below in the episode notes. Dr. Barnard, can't wait for ICNM, but greatly appreciate your time today, my friend. Fantastic episode.
Well, thank you, Chuck.
And if you feel like you have raised your health IQ by a point or two, easy for me to say, be sure to like this video and subscribe to us here on YouTube or on Facebook. That would be fantastic. Coming up Monday on the show, Catherine Lawrence. She's going to be here talking about autism and your diet, managing symptoms with food. She just had a wildly popular TEDx talk, and now she's coming here to the exam room talking about what it is that she's learned living with not one, but two people who are on the spectrum, and her husband and her son. A fantastic conversation coming up Monday here on the show. But for today, that, my friends, is all the time that we have. I want to say thank you once again to Dr. Barnard for being here, also to the crew behind the scenes for making the magic happen, and you exam roomies, thank you guys for so many great questions today. Hope we were indeed able to raise your health IQ. And for everybody at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We will talk to you again very soon, but until then, keep it plant-based.